Ladies and gentlemen, this is WeatherBrains episode number 731. This is for the 20th of January, 2020. And thank you for joining us. This is the pre-show, the magical time where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we occasionally say very outrageous things. So what I'm going to do real quick is get the embed code posted, and then we'll get our guests on here, and we will get started. A little late starting tonight, but that's okay. Used to be back in the Google Hangout days, it would take a long time to get everybody on the show here, but with Zoom, things are a bit easier than they used to be. Colder than a well digger's backside where I am down here in the deep south, probably where you are too. So let's invite our guests and regulars. So here we go. We're going to invite by email. Let's see who we can find to be on the program tonight. Last week we had a Tuesday night special. We are back on our regular schedule. Here we go. And I think that's everybody. So let's hit that button, and just like magic, they should appear on the screen here shortly. Yeah, we're coming up on our 14th anniversary. We started doing the show at the end of January in the year 2006, 14 years ago. So I think next week's show will be the closest one to the anniversary. We pulled this audio from last week. This is what show one listened to. This was the 31st of January, 2016. I personally think we have way too many warnings. Severe thunderstorm warnings are a dime a dozen, and it's getting to be that way with tornado warning.
Welcome to WeatherBrains, the podcast about weather by weather fans. I'm David Black with the Weather Company from...
Reminiscing, Bill.
Those are good memories.
You know, David worked hard. David Black, when he was the host, I mean, he did pre-production, he did post-production. I mean, he worked hard.
He put us to work too. He'd make us come up with stuff.
Oh yeah, but now
we just show up.
What you hear is what you get, man. You know, we. It is what it is, but I think to have survived in this environment for 14 years is pretty remarkable.
Well, it's a testament to your discipline, keeping us on track every week.
Well, all of us, we have. I don't think we've missed a single week in 14 years, which is remarkable.
We've either made it up in the week or before.
Right.
Because of vacations.
So
I'm really proud.
I want to make it to 1,000, then we can all drop dead. Or
don't say that.
I feel good. You know, what's weird is, as old as I am, I feel better now than when I was 30 years old. I feel good.
Yeah, I don't feel any differently for sure. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
you're working out with all those NFL players and MLB players.
I'm the.
What do you
the floors down there?
What do you think about? Oh, I better invite the guests. What do you think about sanctioning the players from that Astros team?
Yeah, I saw Moreland down there last week. Mitch is in kind of an odd place. He's a free agent, and he's obviously negotiating with clubs, and he might wind up in Boston again, but I would love to sit down for 30 minutes and talk with him about what in the world is going on in Major League Baseball and where is this going to end. Yeah. I know that stealing signs has always been part of the game, but it seems like it's escalated to a new level.
It does.
It's not quite right. So, and of course, the Red Sox manager was caught up in this because he was with Houston during that season. So he was fired or released from the Red Sox. So they parted ways.
Do you think they should strip their title?
I don't know. You have to wonder.
Yeah, you really do.
If it really gave them an unfair advantage, then you have to strip the title. And I would assume they're still doing their homework on that. But
now, I saw a survey, maybe I read it wrong, but it said so many percent said the Astros should have theirs stripped and so many percent said the Red Sox should have theirs stripped. How are the Red Sox involved in the scandal?
Well, Cora managed the Red Sox during their World Series year.
Oh,
And Cora
have they proven that it was going on then too, or
was a mastermind of stealing signs, and they just assumed that the Red Sox were stealing signs. And
well, if they wouldn't paint their fingers, they wouldn't be stealing the signs.
I don't need no stinking signs when I'm coaching, man. When I'm coaching, those boys, they know what to do. The first guy that gets on base on my team, the first pitch, you're stealing, you're running. I mean, you just go first pitch.
You just tell them what you're going to do and then do it, huh?
Yeah, man. Look, I don't care. I'm sending these other guys a message that I'm your worst nightmare. I'm going to run on you all day long. So that's the way. The problem is you can't do it past middle school, because in high school those catchers got big guns, and that doesn't work. But in middle school, it still works. So
guess what I got for my birthday, James?
What?
A new A2000 baseball glove.
Ooh!
I oiled it up today, broke it in, pounded it with a hammer for about 30 minutes. And
wow!
Got it all tied up with some rubber bands now, and they're breaking.
So I think we ought to get out there and see what you got. Put you on the mound, see if you got some heat.
Yeah, 36 miles an hour. I can blaze it right in there.
The EFIS, the old EFIS pitch.
Hey, Jillian. Hey, Jeremy. Everybody with J's.
Hi.
Hey, Jeremy.
Hello.
Jeremy, thanks for the gift. I owe you one, man. That's awesome.
I know,
Not
man.
a problem.
Yeah,
That's
stunning.
Glad to do it.
My office
That's mine
looks
right there.
Really impressive.
Actually, real quick, guys, and girls, I have a little surprise for you.
Well,
there we go.
wow.
The better half.
Oh,
hey.
So this
Hi.
is
Hello, everyone.
Valentine's brains.
so this is
Valentine's
Chantel.
brains.
Y'all
Welcome to
should
the
share
show.
From the other ear there. That's a little tip I learned on the
Just popping to
airplane.
say hello to everyone.
Hi.
Well, hello.
Enjoy following along.
Stick
with
around
you
for the
all.
show.
Yeah, sorry, we're
Kick
busting up
Jeremy
your
over to
evening
the
here.
side. Yeah. I hope this wasn't date night, Jeremy.
No,
This is our kind of date night anyway. We love this stuff.
Yeah. this geeky weather stuff. So
Right on.
I'm sure this is pleasing for all the viewers looking at two knuckleheads trying to share a cord that's not long enough. So
Mhm.
We were just thinking, get a run. They
Hi.
didn't hear that.
Bye.
yeah.
Could I say that because we weren't on TV yet?
You can say that because we're not on TV yet. We've got 2 minutes and 30 seconds before we hit the tube. I think I probably should change it. You know, I sit here on the monitor in my office. I have one of our channels is one of the .2s or 3s. It's something called Antenna TV. They run the greatest shows on that channel. They'll run like Green Acres, Three's Company. The Michael Fox shows on there now. It's just like a flashback to the 80s and 70s.
Can you get it on the cable systems, or do you have to get it over?
No, you have to get it over the air. I don't think the cable systems carry it. It's
what was that thing that 13 carried on their sub carrier for a while? METV or something like that?
I don't know. There's so many of them.
Because
That's
it
what
was
we've
like
got.
the same stuff.
Well, this is 21.2. 21.2 is Antenna TV, and that's the greatest. But I look at all these channels that you pick up here. There must be 3 dozen or more. It take me all day just to go through. I'm sure most of it's junk, but there's some diamonds in the rough here.
How are you watching it right now?
I have a TV tuner card that plugs into a computer in this rack in front of me, and I've got some software that lets you watch TV through that tuner card, and it's called iTV, EYETV, which is
Is it
how
legal
I
or
tip.
is it pirated?
No, it's legal, baby. Hey, man, free over the air TV, man. I paid for the software.
One
So, there you
of
go.
my friends was telling me about something that comes out of India that can descramble anything in the planet, and you pay like $500 for it, and it's good for about a year till they figure out how to stop it, and then you have to buy another one. Is that true?
What's amazing? I don't know, but what's amazing, I would say half the population of this country, they do not know that television is free over the air.
Mhm.
They don't know. They didn't grow up with that, and they just don't know. And when kids see that they buy some little $5 antenna at the Walmart and they plug it into their television. And all of a sudden, all these channels start coming in and the quality is stunning and it doesn't cost a dime. And they're thinking, I never knew this was available. And speaking of that, we got to join the television side here.
And thank you for paying.
1. Yeah. Hello. Welcome to our television audience watching on cable systems. We are doing WeatherBrains. It is Monday night. You know what this is. So looks like we're all here. Bill, are we all here? Do we need to roll this thing?
We are.
See Troy and Kim, they're here. Aubrey's here.
I was hoping Dr. John would be here. He's probably still drowning in sorrows after yesterday afternoon.
That was brutal. Yeah, that was brutal. Just brutal. Oh, man. All right, so here we go. Let's hit recorder number 1. I know Kevin said he couldn't make it tonight. Recorder 1, recorder 2, and here we go. In fact, I got a song just for Kevin. Hadn't played that in a while. All right, here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, dadgummit, had the volume down.
False start again. This is like 6 straight shows.
2, 3 in a row. Well, see, I got this new soundboard program. The old one, they didn't make a 64-bit version, so I had to change. All right, here we go in 5, 4. Yeah, a false start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is WeatherBrains, the weekly show that is all about weather. This is episode number 731 for the 20th of January 2020, here in the dead of winter. And man, it feels like the dead of winter. Aubrey, how cold is it in Harrisonburg tonight?
It's 22 degrees.
Ugh.
Ridiculous.
I think it's 22 where we are. We had parts of my market down here in the deep south that never got past the mid-20s today.
It's 27. Right?
Wow.
It's pretty cold. Did you have any flurries, Aubrey? Snow flurries?
No, we had rain. We kind of had a borderline possible mixing, and some areas had some icing just because some of the trees were cold after a couple of hours, but it really stayed about a county north of us toward the Virginia-Maryland border, and that's where they really got some icing, about 1/10 of an inch or so, maybe even just a little bit more in some parts of the panhandle of Maryland.
Okay, well, cool. We had a few flurries in our state. Nashville's had flurries. The Great Smoky Mountains, they had some flurries today. So it's just cold. Dr. Kim Cloco McLean, how was AMS 2020?
Man, it was great. It was pretty busy. It was AMS Centennial, so there was a lot going on, but it was a wonderful time. All of the people who placed their bets on travel disruptions of various kinds were, I think everyone lost no matter what bet you made. There were disruptions, but they were not what we expected. There was an ice storm in Oklahoma that a lot of us had to dodge. That was exciting. Many people were changing their flights around to try to leave a little earlier or later. A lot of people had their flight canceled. When I left Saturday morning, I was like the last plane that made it out. I changed my flight to be the earliest. I was hanging on the cams and just looking at the timing and looking at the consistency run to run. And I thought, okay, I think if I can get the 5 a.m. out, then I can make it. But any later than that, and we are screwed. What I didn't bank on was that Oklahoma City Airport has one de-icer, one. And so the planes, even if they hadn't started icing yet, they still decided to do a de-icing procedure on some of the planes because there was some, I guess there was ice that accumulated because of freezing fog. I didn't account for that factor. And so we were in a line for the one de-icer. So we didn't take off until about an hour later. We almost didn't make it out. We were the last plane before they just canceled everything. And I was like, oh my God, I accounted for so much, but there's just only so much you can do. But I made it. It was good.
I think the show title is Hanging on the Cams so far. That's a great show title for the week. So how was AMS 2020? What was some of the highlights? And we could do a whole show on this, but you are our representative that was on the site there.
Well, Troy was there too. I actually got to hang out with Troy quite a bit.
Troy was there. Troy was there.
Troy was there.
How was it? How was it, man?
No, I thought it was really, really good. Kim and I got to hang out really great sessions, especially in the social sciences, and a lot, I mean, really some presentations that a lot of thought went into, and so forth. So we really had some really good discussions. Sort of as Kim said, there was just so damn much going on that it was hard. I mean, Kim, it was hard to decide what to go and see. It was like, I want to go over there. No, that's around the corner and up the street and back toward New York City. So I'll probably hang on this side of the convention. But it was sort of like, deciding what we would end up going and seeing. So really, really impressive. By the way, I will tell you guys, when I arrived back from AMS, I want everyone to look over this shoulder. And at that picture right there, that picture is from Jeremy and Chantelli.
Wow.
Jeremy, thank you. We're gonna talk more to you, but I love that picture. Already got it framed. The lightning bolts already on display here in the room of crap. It's the office.
That's the show title.
It was like an episode of Hoarders over there.
I was thinking the same thing.
Troy, I feel honored to be amongst the crap.
Thank you. You notice you're standing on top of it, and hopefully none of it falls, Jeremy, because that'll be the last time you ever see me alive.
On top of the crap. Very good. Very good.
But it is one of the classier pieces that I've got here. Thank you, Jeremy and Chantelli. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bill, bringing our guests here. We'll talk more about AMS later, but we got to get this show started. Let's go.
Tonight's guest panelist, James, is a friend of the podcast. He's our resident photography expert. We saw his better half just a few minutes ago, his undergraduate meteorology degree from the Ohio State University, and he's done some work at University of Nebraska. And we welcome him back to the show tonight. Jeremy, how are you?
Doing well, Bill. It's 4 degrees outside, but other than that, can't complain too much.
4.
4.
Got 4.
And not golf either. 4 degrees.
You're about the winner there. Lord, there's a -1 there somewhere. What is that? I guess that 5 is the latest hourly odd. Thank you, darling. I've got my official decaf here. I have to leave at 9:30 because I have that 6 o'clock flight to New York City in the morning. So I'm going to get the heck out of here. But you got some good news that you and your lovely wife got in the last little bit since we talked to you last, haven't you?
That's right. There is to bring kind of everyone who's not familiar with the photography aspect of the world. There's this company out of New York City called Autorama. They have a subsidiary company back then known as Autorama Pics, but now known as Printnique. Well, every year they hold an annual competition to submit your best photo of the year. So last year being 2019, you were supposed to submit your best photo for 2018. So it could be anything. And they had submissions from around the world. And so we submitted our tornado picture from near Cheyenne, Wyoming from May 27th of 2018. And to make a long story short, out of thousands and thousands of entries, we got the word that we made the top 100 as voted by the judges. It went to a popular choice. We placed in the top 25. And then the final panel of expert judges, so they brought in people from different parts of the United States and the world, and we made the top 12. So we were voted one of the top 12 photographs taken in the world for 2018.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Congratulations. And there's the same picture I have, I think, right? That's the picture I chose.
Yep. That is what we call atmospheric magic. So that's the stuff that you can get to see out in the plains and Nebraska and so forth. But it's been quite an interesting 14 months for that particular thing to occur is really mind-boggling. And we're just very, very proud and honored to have that amongst some of the best photographs of 2018.
Well, we are proud of you too, and we're running a special promotion here on WeatherBrains. If you suggest the guest, you get to be the panelist. That is how we moved Jeremy up the ladder here a little bit, and moved him up because he suggested tonight's guest, and she is the deputy emergency manager for Douglas County, Kansas. And if you don't know where that is, that's Lawrence, where the University of Kansas is. And Jillian Rodrigue, welcome to WeatherBrains. I hope I said that right.
You did great. You did fantastic.
Nobody else on this panel could have gotten that right, Jillian. And I wouldn't have gotten it right if you hadn't told me phonetically how to say it. So would you have gotten it right, Troy?
No, absolutely not. But Jillian, I would have gotten right. So I'll take a little
Well,
credit.
I didn't even get that right, Troy. I wrote her an email and called her Jennifer.
Oh, okay. Still.
So, but I called my own
Jillian, you
mistake.
showed up for this. I mean,
And she was too graceful to tell me that I screwed up. But I'm hammering out emails. Keys are popping off my Mac, all the time. And
I understand. Yeah.
so I corrected myself, but I felt bad about it. So Jillian, and if I call you Jennifer tonight, Jillian, just slap me or something. But
Answer to anything is good.
you grew up in Berwick in southern Louisiana. Does anybody know where Berwick is on the panel?
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
There you go. Troy knows everything.
Yep.
But tell us about the town of Berwick, Jillian. Where it is and what it's about.
Small town. Just a small town in South Louisiana where basically everyone knows everybody else. My dad was in law enforcement, so I didn't get in much trouble growing up because usually they'd know before I got home. So I learned that very quickly. But all of my family is still there. So some of them are actually listening and or watching because they're still in South Louisiana. So go home.
We already tuned out. Don't worry. All of our silliness. Yeah.
Jillian, is that closer? Is that closer to New Orleans, Baton Rouge, south of Lafayette, southeast of Lake Charles? What
Homa.
parish is that?
How is it related to Homa? That's my town.
Okay.
All right. So we're 30 minutes west of Homa if you drive on Highway 90.
Okay.
Close to Thibodeau?
Keep coming. I went to school. You got to go a little bit further west and you'll find us.
Oh, goodness. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. So you went to Nichols for a while, huh?
I did about a year at Nichols, and then I transferred to the University of Louisiana at Monroe, and that's where I got my meteorology degree.
Cool.
But you didn't like forecasting, you said.
No, it just didn't do it. It didn't, drive me. And surely about that time, Hurricanes Katrina and Rita had come on shore. I was in both of those. I had family impacted in both of them. And shortly after that, we had an emergency management group that came over from Mississippi, came over to the university, talked about what they did. And that's when it all clicked. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I searched emergency management, got super lucky when I got to Kansas. My boss had a job opening, and the rest is just history.
There you go. So go back to, and we got to go back at least one major hurricane before that, because I want to talk about your hurricane experience. But Rita was kind of chaos in southern Louisiana, because I remember we had a hotel in Homa, and we had been through Katrina, and the hotel had made it fine, but just the stories were heartrending. And then here comes this other hurricane, and it caused all sorts of problems in South Louisiana. Levees, dikes broke, all sorts of things. There was one point where part of some town was on fire. There was flooding. And then I think there was a small earthquake, and there were fears of a tsunami. And I think we were about ready to evacuate southern Louisiana after that. So did you get deployed to the coast for both those hurricanes, Julie?
I was in school at the time, and I was part of a research team. So we went down to put up research towers in both Katrina and Rita to get the data. And of course, the data part, not my favorite, but I can tell you where every piece of equipment was. And it was partly my job to make sure we had a place to stay, so a hotel. And then also
travel agent for the group, huh?
Yes, I was completely logistics management. I was golden. So I knew the equipment, I had a place to stay. And then I also worked with the local government officials to make sure that we had access and we could get to where we needed to be and didn't get arrested while we were on the trip.
Well, that's always good. You tend to try to stay not arrested. My 16-year-old was telling me he's, taking driver's ed in school right now, and they were studying how many points you could lose before you lose your driver's license. I said, the number is 0. I don't care if it's 20 or 30 or whatever. The number is 0. So that was your job, to keep everybody straight, huh? I guess
that was my job.
Coming from a background in with a family in law enforcement, I guess that came pretty easily for you.
Julie?
Troy, I know you got a question for Jimmy.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested. I know you're up in Kansas now, but I want to get that perspective a little bit for the time that you spent growing up, a father in law enforcement in a parish in southern Louisiana, and then your experience as you're working your way through your college career. That's an interesting place as far as as response is concerned and preparedness, there's nothing like Southern Louisiana, those coastal parishes and areas like that. And I guess my question for you is, do you think from afar, which I consider Kansas to be afar from Southern Louisiana, do you consider from afar that those areas are prepared down there? You think the people understand the dangers with being in those areas, especially what they've been through in the past?
I think there are a lot of people that are. And I think there are some that aren't. Risk is a really hard thing for people to grasp, even in the last hurricane. So my family still being there, we have this conversation regularly when hurricanes come, barreling into the Gulf of Mexico, and it's a constant conversation. Are you staying? Are you going? What's the safest place for you to be? I get the same call during severe weather for them. They'll kind of check in. Now, my family is incredibly prepared. I would have never put the pieces together growing up, but looking back now, my parents have a boat just in case. They're 18 inches above sea level, and they're right next to a river. So they have a boat, they have a generator, they have food, they have resources. But there are folks down there that don't. They don't have the resources. And the choice that they make is the one that they can. And so I think I get the feeling it's the same thing everywhere. It's going to be the same thing here in Kansas, as it is going to be across the country. Is there are definitely folks that they're prepared, they have their plan, they're ready to go. And then there's always going to be those that either take a little bit more coaxing, or just aren't going to go anywhere. I can tell you my dad is one of those, and that's why he's so prepared. He's never going to evacuate. He was in the military and he was deployed to hurricanes. He's in law enforcement. So he always stayed, but he always made sure his family had a place to go and we were always safe. And that was the key thing for him.
But you got to, tell me if I'm wrong. You're from down there. I had grandparents at one time from Lake Charles over in Calcasieu Parish. So I know that area, but this is a unique area of the country. It's a remote area of the country that most people that are watching us on WeatherBrains, Jillian, I assume, probably don't understand how remote it is. You want to get remote, go into some of those coastal parishes of Southern Louisiana, right?
Yeah, definitely. We're 9 miles from the Gulf of Mexico. As the crow flies, there really aren't any roads south of us. And areas further south get even worse. So Venice and Buras and those areas, those are incredibly remote. It's difficult once a storm comes up. It's either you stay or you go. There's no in between. And so we do see a lot of movement from those particularly remote coastal parishes moving in, evacuating, not sticking around after what they've experienced. Some still will. I think the majority have learned and will move to a better place when the hurricanes come on shore.
Pretty. What I always say about Southern Louisiana to some degree is pretty hardy stock. Pretty hardy stock in those areas, because you have to be, in a sense. And I assume too, you've got to sort of have your plans, because you pointed out, you say, well, what if that road floods? Well, if that road floods, that's the only road you have that you're managed to get out on. I think it's very interesting. So I appreciate your perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and wasn't there a network radar station at Boothville
at one time? Yeah,
southern parts of the river down there. Did you ever learn about anything about any of that, Jillian? That time down there, that was way before your time.
I think that was that was before me. We did have a tower down at Buras during Katrina, but that's about as far as we know as anything from down there.
So what was your first hurricane?
That site, Bill, down there at Boothville, and James can tell you, because James, let's face it, we're that old.
We are that old.
But I remember that site, and the bad thing about it was, and even I remember the Boothville site during Camille in August of '69, of how that site went down pretty quickly because the rain bands from Camille that went by. But very happy to see when they moved the radar up to Slidell.
Yeah, very, very good. So have you seen any of the movies that have come out about the coastal wetlands of Southern Louisiana? Jillian, does that stuff, sort of resonate with you since you've lived in the middle of it?
No, not very many. I hear mostly the stories that I've lived are a lot of through my dad telling about Camille and Betsy, and he remembers all of those being in them. And of course he was in Hurricane Andrew in '92 as well, which is the one that sort of started this crazy path of mine.
So was that your first major hurricane that you went through?
That was the first one I remember. That one hit the house dead on. I went over our house. My dad stayed. We evacuated to just south of Monroe, Louisiana, and the storm came right there. So we were under tornado warnings for hours. And I remember that. I remember that one as a kid, and just struggling when I got home. Because of course, when you drive further south, the damage just keeps getting worse as you go. And so I remember we drove south and I was seeing houses destroyed. And to this day, I still have dreams about damage that happened. Called my mom and said, man, I had the strangest dream. And she said, yeah, that was from Hurricane Andrew. So that storm has stuck with me my entire life now. And it's just a part of the story.
Well, James, did you deploy to Andrew in Louisiana, or were you
Yes.
here? So you were down
Yes.
there. Any stories from the road from that hurricane?
Well, for me, for Andrew, we made a horrible mistake. There was a tornado at Laplace, Louisiana, which is west of New Orleans. Pretty good tornado. This was not your typical EF0. This was, I want to say it was an EF2. And the eye was coming up, and I had the boneheaded idea that we could get a satellite shot out of there during the eye's passage during our morning news block. And that was about as boneheaded as it gets. Sure enough, the back edge of the eye wall came over right about the time we're supposed to go live. So I was just thankful I wasn't fired after that debacle. But
Was it a rental satellite truck?
no.
I hope you took the insurance, James.
Hey, that's what they make insurance for.
It was rough.
Kim, you go. You got a question for Jillian.
Yeah, I've been really enjoying your insights about what it's like in southern Louisiana and how the population handles hurricanes. Something that in the Severe Storms Lab we've been talking about internally is with respect to Louisiana is the perspective of the Vortex Southeast program. It's a program designed to study tornadoes and how they intersect with local populations in the South and Southeast. And Louisiana is one of those states. It's in the Southeast, but there really hasn't been a lot of study about it. We don't know a lot about the populations there and how they adapt to tornadoes, how they respond to them. Give us some of your perspective. What is life like down there when tornadoes occur? Sometimes, like we've all discussed just now, they happen with hurricanes, but you can get it both ways. Even just this year, there have been several systems that have come through that have affected Louisiana that have been very intense. Would love to hear a little bit from your perspective about what the populations do with the tornado threat.
You know, it's been a while. I've been in Kansas almost 13 years now, but still have friends and family in the area. It's always a big deal when, during hurricanes, it's sort of expected. That's just part of the hurricane itself. But when we get these large systems that move through, like we've seen over even the last couple of months, where we've seen some very large tornadoes go through areas, it's not like the Midwest where, seemingly, it's an expectation. You live in Kansas, there's going to be tornadoes. It's just kind of part of life here. But I think they're beginning to sort of feel that as maybe even a change in culture is, this happens more often, particularly down south. Even over the last, several years with my friends and family reaching out and going, oh, what do you think about today? Do you think it's going to be bad? Walking them through, going back through some of those things of, all right, you need to find your lowest, level, interior room. Of course, we're not dealing with basements. Most people don't have, or I'd say a lot don't have a really sturdy structure. That just wasn't part of the culture when, their homes were built. Of course, the water table's too high to have a basement. And so it's helping them find their best place to go. And it's been a really interesting turn and just kind of watching them engage with this sort of new, not that they haven't had tornadoes before, but really sparking that conversation of what do we do and where do we go, and making sure they get the information. I think they are learning and they're very prepared for a lot of things, but not with the same previous expectation like you would in the Midwest. I know there's so many outbreaks and just different tornadoes going through areas, particularly in the evening hours, early morning hours, where people are just aware of what's going on, and then not having a great shelter is a huge concern. Every time those go through, that's always a concern of mine is, do they have an adequate shelter to stay while that tornado passes through? And that continues to be a concern for me, for my family and friends that are still there.
Well,
Yeah,
I've got to
sorry.
wonder too, to some degree, Jillian, if where you are, no offense, it's great. I mean, there are 3 hills and 4 trees. So you can see what's going on around you. You see tornadoes 10, 12 miles away. And in southern Louisiana and those southern states, and that's part of the attention that you see in Vortex Southeast, is because of 40-foot pine trees, other vegetation, very low ceilings, cloud heights. You just don't see these things. I think other parts of the country sort of expect to see what you see in Kansas or in Oklahoma, and it's just not going to be that way. Even in James part of the woods in Alabama, Mississippi, and parts of Louisiana, it's still a tornado, but I don't think it's what people sort of expect to see in that part of the country. You don't know what that, they've never really seen one before.
And I think that goes along with some of the sociological, factors of all this is people look for, oh, when I see it, then I'll know it's a real thing. And you're not going to, 9 times out of 10, you're not really going to get a good shot of it down south. There's just, like I said, there's too much in the way. And does that hinder people's, sort of risk assessment that, well, if I can't see it, then maybe it's not a real thing and I don't need to take it as seriously as I would, because I've seen the videos of tornadoes and they're big and you can see them forever. And just not the case down there.
Well, one thing too that I'll tell you, and Kim, I interrupted you, and my apologies, but I taught a law enforcement class one time in Mississippi on tornadoes, and I had an officer one time tell me, well, I've never seen a tornado before, but I was watching this thunderstorm and all this rain, and it was rotating, and I kind of told him, well, guess what? You did see one. It was the middle of that rain, because it's just not something that's so apparent as you see, like you see, Kim, in Oklahoma or Jillian up in Kansas. And I think it's interesting. People, part of risk, help me out, Kim, is being able to recognize and make a decision. And if the first thing you see is the tree blow out of the ground next to the house in the swirl of stuff, maybe you don't react. I don't know.
Yeah, that's right on. No, and that's something, hasn't been something studied in Louisiana, but elsewhere in the Southeast, I think it was Alabama, they found there's a large number of people there who expect exactly what you're saying. I think it's that it's been popularized on TV. Yeah. This is what a tornado looks like. This is what you should be looking for. And it just doesn't work like that in the Southeast. It certainly doesn't work like that in Louisiana. So you're right on that. That's definitely a challenge. And another challenge that you made me think about when you were talking about how there aren't roads. I mean, anyone who's been through southern Louisiana, it's even hairier than elsewhere in the Southeast. There are places where there aren't great road networks because of hills and trees and things. But water is it's just a totally different animal. You drive through southern Louisiana and you just have this overwhelming sense that it's trying to get rid of you, like it is trying to heft you out and carry you on your way somewhere else. And
that's the show title.
I have driving through southern Louisiana, I've thought about this. Where in the world would you go? So if you wanted to seek a safer shelter, there was a really nice study that was done by Stephen Strader, who's been on the show recently, for Alabama, where he mapped out where every mobile manufactured home is and he calculated how long it would take you to get somewhere else, to a better site-built home or a public facility. I bet in Louisiana, it is at least twice as long, because you just don't have a straight A to B that's possible. And yeah, so I don't know if you can comment on that, if you'd ever even heard of people leaving a mobile home ahead of a tornado. Is that even something people consider or think about with this extra barrier?
You take the airboat, Kim.
Right? Honestly, that's in your boat. And there's alligators, and I mean, there are all kinds of other threats.
Get started on the reptiles.
Yeah, but that's Louisiana.
Right. And if you think about all of the folks that spend their time on the water, so there's a number of camps where people have, their second house is on the bayou. There is no other place to go. I mean, that's it. You're not going anywhere. You're not going to outrun it in a boat. And there's so many of these things. There's so much outdoor activity that happens there as well as, some places that are just, lower socioeconomic and lower income. So you are seeing a lot more of those mobile home parks, and just, there's very few places to go, places that stay open, a lot of small town spaces in between the small towns. So you're absolutely right. My niece was living in a mobile home. And that was one of the first things we always talked about was which house is the closest. Was it her mom's or her mother-in-law's? And which one could she get to? And that was kind of the decision point. And it's one road.
Yeah.
You got your one, and if you can't get out of the neighborhood, you have nowhere to go, because if it already flooded, which it floods regularly, there's really not a lot of options if you're not thinking ahead. And again, not a lot of people think that far ahead or think that far in advance. I mean, that's just a culture in most places. They wait until there's something, and then they go, oh, I need to make a decision, and then they start that process.
So Kim, what is the median number right now, or the mean number, I guess, of that research? Is it 20 minutes, 25 minutes? And I know it varies by location, but what's the general average right now that you're hearing?
I'm going to try to recall the numbers accurately from Stephen broke apart sort of the northern part of Alabama and southern, because they have very different characteristics. I think in the northern part of the state, there were more public shelters available, and it's just generally higher population density. So the timing, I think, was something around the average lead time for tornado warnings, which it was about 13 minutes. It was something where you looked at it and you said, okay, push comes to shove, there's just enough time, but it's still uncomfortable for most people. And you probably want them to be a little proactive. I think in the southern part of the state, those numbers were higher by a couple of minutes outside the bounds of the average lead time. And you've got to recall, the tornadoes that happen in the Southeast, a good number of them are these sort of lower lead time embedded, something that's embedded in a line sort of thing, not a long track supercell with a long lead time. So hearing all of that, it's still the bottom line to the research was it's too late. If you wait for the warning, it's really not safe to try to evacuate in that time scale. You have to have something that helps you to do it before that point. But that's what the numbers were looking like.
But y'all are working on that now, aren't you, to some degree? James, you, Kim, other folks, a product that might be an intermediary between the watch and the warning? Oh, fingers crossed.
We had a follow-up IWT meeting, which this was private. It was just for the chief meteorologist and the WCM and the SU and the MIC to start opening up a conversation about coordinating a message like that. And as well as some other things, but I think, what happened while you guys were in Boston, we had 3 more fatalities here, and all 3 were in mobile homes. Two of those that were killed, it was a husband and wife. It involved a mobility issue. Yep. The husband had to have a bed lift, and they didn't have a way of moving him, and the wife just decided to stay there with him. And if they were to die, they die together. And by golly, they did. They both passed away. The other situation, I think they could have gotten out, but we're trying to start a dialogue on some type of message that we can coordinate in terms of telling people when to get out of a mobile home before a warning is issued. And this is not easy. There's a lot of ramifications here, but we're trying to coordinate and make an effort to see if we can do something, because it's just getting out of hand. It's just over and over and over and over. We're seeing the same thing happen. And so yeah, the work is underway. We'll get there. I'm convinced we're good enough to get there.
That's really wonderful to hear. I'm glad you guys are doing it. It's a tough task. Excited to hear more when you guys have something to share about what that looks like. But for Alabama, same thing for Louisiana. I mean, if you have some success, then hopefully this can spread to more places, because it's certainly the challenge, I think, for tornado survivability in the South.
I've got one. This kind of bring it back to Jillian again. So Jillian, tell me a little bit about Douglas County, Kansas, and that area that you're responsible for. These things we've talked about in the South, do you, as deputy emergency manager in Douglas County, do you have those same sort of problems? What about the people that live? Mobile homes are a great place to live. They're just not a good place to be on a tornado day. And my question for you, Jillian, is what kind of issues do you see, or do you see as many issues with people? Are they more apt to leave a mobile home in Douglas County, Kansas, than maybe they are in the South where you're located now, up in Kansas?
It's a great question. So Douglas County is made up of a number of cities. So Lawrence is our largest. And then of course we have Eudora, Baldwin, and Lecompton, and then some unincorporated areas. So we do have a number of mobile home parks in the communities. Our hazard mitigation plan talks about that. They are a high risk population when it comes to tornadoes, as tornadoes are one of our highest risks as well. So we did on May 28th, we had a large tornado go through, EF3 for our area, EF4 as it moved into Leavenworth County. And that was one of our big concerns, was sheltering options for those folks that were in the path. Originally, we thought that tornado was going to come directly through the city of Lawrence. So what we end up with, our big concerns, not only are the mobile home parks, some of which have storm shelters, some don't. But there's no requirement that says a storm shelter has to have, or a mobile home park has to have a tornado shelter. So some do, some don't. But it is a constant conversation for us that if you live in a mobile home park, and as we were gearing up for that day, because we knew it was going to be a bad day, it was one of those well forecast, we knew it was coming, there was no surprise. So we were telling people, hey, look, if have a neighbor, go visit, stay with them. Can you stay with friends or family or anywhere else, but that mobile home park? Don't wait for the warning. Every house that got hit on May 28th was an actual home. We did not have any mobile homes. We had a couple of vehicles, semi overturned and another vehicle and some other things. But most, again, and very few injuries. We were very fortunate in that sense. But we think about the same thing. We also have a very mobile population. And not just in the sense that people move around, but with the universities, we have folks that are coming in from other countries, other cities. They don't really know about tornadoes, where they're supposed to go. It's not necessarily on the top of their radar. We also move a lot. Our population just generally moves. We have a lot of rentals. So when they're trying to figure out what county they're in and what part of the city they're in, or are they at risk? Or are they not at risk? Where do they go? Because they don't have that network built.
Do you have, Jillian, do y'all have any Douglas County sponsored or co-sponsored type facilities that you have that people can go to? I think we're seeing more of those. I know we are in Northeast Mississippi, because I have some friends in emergency management there, and the county's really starting working at grant money and trying to do some of this county stuff, even for smaller shelters with more of them, so that people have a shorter distance to go, like Kim pointed out, to be able to do that. But I take it y'all don't have any county sponsored shelters.
No, there's some agreements that are made with some of the parks and some other facilities that those in the park can come over to a more sturdy shelter, sturdy building. But the county does not have any sponsored storm shelters. That's some of the conversation now. There's grant funds for some different things that the state of Kansas is looking at. So we're kind of excited and not exactly sure what that's going to look like. But we may be able to, hopefully we can empower homeowners. Because really it would be best if people could stay where they are and not have to leave their home or leave their, at least their general vicinity to get to a safe place. And so those are some of just the conversations that are ongoing now, but we do not have any like community shelters that are opened up officially, at least at this time.
Well, let me ask you one other thing, because you're close to where the EF3 was, right? You're fairly close to that. Have you been able, Jillian, to see, because this, Kim, we've seen it in Moore. We've seen it in Norman. We've seen it in other places where these big tornadoes have occurred in the past and rebuilding efforts go on. And it's pretty amazing the number of shelters you'll see that homeowners start. Once you get affected by something, that affects how you perceive that risk. And my question is, I guess, in the rebuilding process this last year, Jillian, are you seeing, or have you seen any evidence of rebuilding by homeowners and inclusion of shelters in rebuilt homes and things like that?
I have not, but that's not to say it's not going on. Right after the tornado, we had another flooding disaster. So as things got going, we stayed pretty busy. Now, I do know that there were some grant funds that came in from local charities and organizations. Our zoning and codes worked really hard to get people those permits back. But I'm not sure at this point, or at least nobody said that's what they decided to do. We have a few builders that put together some townhomes on kind of our southwestern quarter, and those have shelters built into them. So that was a pretty exciting thing to see, that without a requirement to put in a safe room of some sort. That's really nice to see. That was one of the first things that came up off the foundation, was that tornado shelter. We got really excited about that somebody's willing to take the risk, take the money to actually build that into place for our community. So that's really exciting to see. And I hope as we continue down that path, we'll see more of that.
Thank you.
And I know on May 28th, I was panicking because we have a hotel in Lawrence,
Yep.
and it was coming right for it.
Remember that.
And I gave the general manager about an hour and 15-minute heads up. And, he told me later, he said, Mr. Murray, I had to have a new pair of underwear, after that, because when you call me up, because he was from Georgia, not like they don't have tornadoes in Georgia, but I guess, he was intimidated by the fact that it was coming right for him. But that makes 4 hotels, 4 tornadoes in the last 12 months. So storm chasers, if you need a place to stay and you want to be guaranteed to bag a tornado, call me and I'll hook you up with one of our hotels.
Now you're travel agent. Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to take over Jillian's job because they seem to be finding us for sure.
Yeah.
But, and there's a great coffee place there in Lawrence, Wake the Dead. Is that one of your favorite places, Jillian? Yeah.
They were super good to us. They brought, there were a number of businesses that did after the tornado, but they brought donuts to our public works folks as they were still dealing with debris and everything else going on. They brought coffee and donuts one morning. So yes, we are very familiar with them and very grateful for them and a number of other businesses.
Now, that's a smart town. I mean, there's some brilliant people. It's a very progressive town.
Mhm.
And in a lot of ways has a lot of great things going on for it. I mean, probably primarily because of the university and the people that have moved there over time and taken up residence. But it is a wonderful town for sure. But you went to Greensburg in 2007 after that
Wow.
tornado, didn't you? So talk about that experience.
I did. So I moved to Lawrence in March of 2007. My third week of work I spent in Greensburg.
Wow.
They put out the call for they needed help, and data entry was the offer note. So my boss comes to me and she says, "Jillian, I think you can do this." Now, granted, I have no emergency management experience whatsoever. And she says, "It's data entry. You're good with computers. Go." And I went, "Okay." So I get in the car with, several of our other folks from the county who went down there. We get into the command post, and of course the incident commander looks at me and he says, "Who are you?" And I said, he says, "Who are you with?" And I said, "Emergency management." Right into the action plans. And I was like, what? He said, "Yeah, just go sit over there." Data entry was not what I was doing. But it was a really, it was a great opportunity to learn. And it really set the stage for, I've been deployed to a number of different places to support them after disasters, and it's unfortunate, but there's no better way to learn and bring back to your community lessons learned than to go to somebody else's disaster and support them. I felt honored that I could go and be a part of their recovery process. That town still holds a very, a dear place in my heart. I met a number of people, and it was taking all of that hurricane experience and sort of all of that I dealt with and brought it over there and had a chance to just talk to people, help them. That's really what it was all about. It's what I've wanted to do my whole life, was help people. And emergency management has been the way to do that. So it started in Greensburg. I've been a few other places since then just to support them with public information, and it's neighbors helping neighbors is really what it comes down to. It's our ability and our skills in taking them someplace else, because on May 28th, we needed it and they showed up. You mentioned, KU and the university. The 2 EMs from KU showed up at our doorstep. And one of the most beautiful things that was said to me, because their main emergency manager, so wicked smart guy, could have run the EOC. And what did he do? He made coffee and he plugged in my phone. And once he tied my shoes, right? It's great. I so appreciate him for that. But he said everyone has a role in a disaster, and he said sometimes you just got to look for it. And that role that he took on was supporting me and the staff. We were down. We had an interim director. Half of the staff wasn't in the office. Either they were on medical leave or they had already left for another job. So we were kind of in a pickle at that point, just really low on resources, and they came flooding in. And that's really where it showed that when you need help, there's a community of people that are willing to show up, and they show up in droves, and they do incredible work. The same thing with volunteers. They're absolutely amazing. And we could not have asked for more during both of those events, both the May 28th tornado and the August 1st flood.
So have any of y'all seen the front line about Fire in Paradise? Kim, have
Yeah.
you seen that? Or you, Troy? That is an amazing show.
Yeah.
And the takeaway for me was that everything that could have gone wrong went wrong, and their plan was overwhelmed. So you've talked, Jillian, about being, involved in the planning process, and all those people that were involved said, prepare to just be overwhelmed and have the plan go out the window. And do you think about that sometimes, or do you choose not to?
The plan is the baseline, and really it's the planning process. So it's the ability to have people think through beforehand what we're going to do, and who's going to show up at the table. We haven't had a disaster like that, May 28th since 2003, when we had a tornado go through the south side of town. And so really what that plan was is it gave us a baseline to start with. And everybody at least knew what their general role and responsibility was. And then you basically just took whatever else happened. There were plenty of things that we went, I didn't think to give the public information officers access to my voicemail mailbox because we'd never tested it before. And they sit in my office during the tornado, and that's where they were running, but they couldn't get to my voicemail because they didn't have a password. So there were a lot of little things, and there were some big things that we just went, oh, okay. All right, let's pull the right people together and let's make a decision and how are we going to move forward. So the plan is not nearly as beneficial as the process itself and the relationships that are built. Our community came together that day, both state, local, federal, township, city. It didn't matter. They all came to the table and said, what can we do to help? And how do we move the process forward? And it sounds like a dream, like we got everything right, and we didn't. We've got lots of ways that we're going to get better, hopefully, but there will be another one at some point. And it's maybe worse than what we dealt with, but we're going to be better prepared and better off now for the conversations that we've had and the ones that we're going to have coming soon. So we do think about that. We know that it's never going to go according to plan. You can ask any emergency manager. There's always going to be some wrench that gets thrown in, and you're going to go, if I'd have put this in an exercise, they would have thrown me out of the room. But, it's just part of who we are, and it's adapt and overcome and get the right people in the room, make a decision, and move forward.
Yeah, so I want to follow up on that point. You've mentioned a couple of times, speaking of sort of adapting and overcoming, one of the big things you've had to deal with over the last year is flooding. You've kind of offhandedly mentioned there have been flooding disasters. Now, our listeners might have heard, I feel like Nebraska got a whole lot of, the lion's share of that attention, rightly so they got a lot of attention because they just had an overwhelming share of their state that was underwater for a very long time, and a lot of economic damage and other kinds of damage that have resulted from that. But you're in northern Kansas, really close to Nebraska. Tell us a little bit about what was going on in Kansas, and maybe even a little bit of how you felt about, were you guys getting the attention and aid you needed? I mean, it was just, the scale of things was so large. What was happening there with the flooding?
I think most of the state of Kansas may have been underwater as well. So of course, like you said, Nebraska got hammered. Those poor folks, I think, are still doing some muck outs and cleaning houses and just really struggling. I see Jeremy shaking his head down there. They're still struggling. For us, the water had been high for so long. Really, there were a number of things going on. So agriculture, very specifically. So our farming and agricultural community struggled. They had been in drought before, and lost a number of crops, and now they were flooding. And whether or not they could get seed in, that's really who we don't hear and see a whole lot about. You see the houses and you see those underwater, but our agriculture community just kind of gets lost in all of that. And there was a big push after the tornado and the flood, with our agriculture folks, to really do a strong reach to them, to make sure they were okay, that there were resources. Douglas County has a whole a video now about suicide with our farming community and our agriculture partners. It's a great video to reach out to them and let them know that there is help, and that there's support out there. I think we flash flooded more times last year than I knew what to do with. Every time it rained, my basement flooded, and so my other half and he would head down to the basement with the shop vac, and I would go into work every time it rained. And so we were in places that flooded that don't normally flood. And then we had an area that flooded in 2017 that basically ended up with a 500-year flood. It was down near the town of Lone Star. Water came up very quickly. That was a really interesting event where it poured, but it rained right over the watershed. And so after it rained, all that water rushed into the Washington Creek and then Wakarusa River, and it just flooded that area again. And so they were also dealing with it. Our townships, so we have a county and then a township system. And those folks, they got nailed. I mean, every time they'd clear a road, it'd get washed out again. So they were really struggling. And it was a constant process. August 1st was the big event, but it was week after week after week after week of, well, we fixed the road and it's washed out again. So we went to fix it and it got washed out again. And so we fixed it and it washed out again. And all of that takes a toll on local just on local folks themselves, their bank accounts for them, just the coffers themselves. It was a struggle this year. And it's exhausting mentally to deal with that many emergencies. So mental health was a huge part of what we pushed this year and will continue to do. We've got a really strong mental health partnership. And so we're going to keep that. We're already talking about the state of Kansas has a flood webinar and workshop coming up because it looks like it's going to be another one of those years. So we're bracing again and hoping that we don't get that disaster fatigue where people go, there's nothing I can do about it anyway. And they don't take those preparedness actions and they don't assess that risk. Also, insurance is going to be huge. For trying to get people. A lot of those people didn't have flood insurance. They were in the 500-year flood, or they had been told, hey, your mortgage is paid off. You don't need that flood insurance anymore. And so that's been a real struggle, just to try to get everybody back on board, and maybe get some of those properties out of the floodplain. That's a huge push for the county, where we can. So I know it's been a year, and now we're in winter weather where we're dealing with ice storms, but severe weather season is going to be here before we know it. And we're already starting to plan for what that looks like. So I know, Jeremy, you've got some thoughts about Nebraska and what they dealt with and what you guys had.
Yeah, I'll just be real brief here. My wife and I have lived in Lincoln now for about 15 years. And, it's been well stated. I mean, we were weather photographers, storm chasers, what have you. So, we've seen different disasters. We've seen different things happen. This is probably the absolute worst disaster I have ever seen with my eyes. Just put it into perspective, Lincoln itself had 55 inches of snow last year. Our last measurable snowfall, I believe, was somewhere around March 6th or 7th. So most of the parts of the state had anywhere between, give or take, maybe an 8-inch and a foot snowpack. The very following week, we were in the 60s. So all that snowpack completely eradicated, completely melted, just like that. And from that point forward, as Jillian mentioned, it felt like every little rain shower, every little system that came through, it was widespread flooding, even in Lincoln. And Lincoln has the infrastructure. Omaha has the infrastructure to somewhat, combat that. You look at some of these pictures from some of these communities, and I mean, it's not to be too harsh, but some of these communities will never be rebuilt. I mean, they just will not be rebuilt. So it was one of those things with the coverage. I think sometimes we felt that the coverage was justified. Obviously, there were sometimes we thought just like, we wish we could have a little bit more. But at this juncture, it's just we're trying to help as much as we can with these different communities to rebuild them. But again, with so much infrastructure gone, so many bridges gone and everything, it's just going to be very difficult for these communities, these rural communities, to ever recover.
Do you feel like it's a double punch almost, that some of these rural communities were probably some of the agriculture hubs? So there's the infrastructure gone to reach them, but also there's sort of the operation is broken. Do you know much about what's becoming of the farm families?
There are probably some farm families. I mean, I don't know anyone directly, so I'll say that right off the bat, but there are probably some farm families that through the different media out here, through the newspapers and so forth, that a lot of these families may never be able to get their farms back. I mean, it's just completely, we were just, I think just maybe 3 or 4 months ago, my wife and I, we were going along I-29. And I-29, just for everyone to get their geography down, I-29 is the north-south interstate. It would, you go across 80 in Omaha, then you can grab I-29. So it's kind of like you're kind of skirting right there between Nebraska, Iowa, and then going into Missouri. The water was literally like right up to the interstate. And we're not talking, inch of water, 2 inches of water, 3 inches of water. We're talking probably almost a foot of water. And it's almost right up on the road. And this is an interstate. So just, try to, because I think for a lot of people, it's difficult to really express flooding because, tornadoes, you show damaged homes and so forth. But I think a lot of people have a hard time fathoming when we talk about flooding and a flooding disaster. And I think for the general public, it's like, well, what exactly does that look like? When you start seeing some of these pictures and some of these major roads are not open for 2 months on hand, 3 months, 4 months, then we finally get it open. Then a system comes through and dumps 3 inches of rain and now it's closed again for another 2 months. That's really disruptive to the rebuilding process. And unfortunately, like I said, I think for the agricultural community, the damages are astronomical. The last figure I saw, I think it was in the hundreds of billions. It's probably more than that. And for a state that is still primarily agricultural based, I don't even know if we're going to see the full effects from that just yet. I think that's still going to be something we're going to have to deal with in the months and so forth down the road.
Well, Jeremy and Jillian, both of you, I don't think people understand what it's like to be in a building or a home that has been underwater. Everything you have is gone. I've had relatives that were in Alvin back in Claudette, back in the early 80s, and water chased them to the second story of their home on Chocolate Bayou down there. And Jillian and Jeremy, everything they have was gone. And then what's left is you just don't, you don't have, tornado will scatter what you have. Mm-hmm. This just destroys it. A tornado, you have the chance of digging something out of the debris. I'm going to tell you, in a house that's under muddy water, you're not going to get anything out.
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. And that's so much of what we saw here. And the fact that not only did they lose parts of their house for flooding, insurance didn't cover where they thought insurance might. So then they, ours was kind of a weird thing. And some of the families thought, well, it's got to be, is there a fault somewhere? Like, was something not done right? Because our reservoirs were up, and, there were some other things, and then insurance didn't come in. And they were just really frustrated. But one of the beautiful things that we saw just this week, so we put together a long-term recovery committee, and I'm going to guess Nebraska's got a number of these as well. Number of our private or nonprofit groups came together and were able to provide grants and funds to help put people who tried to go through insurance and use some of their own funds and clean things out. This wasn't the before insurance. This is after everything else is covered. You get a little bit of help. They sent an email to one of the partners, and I was in tears. She was in tears. She said it really it put them back into a sense where somebody cared. Because for a long time, that family felt like nobody cared. They'd forgotten, that they'd completely forgotten about. And that's, I think, a lot of people after disasters, whether it's a flood or it's a tornado, whatever disaster it is, it gets all of this media coverage to begin with. And then the media has something else to talk about the next, week. And a lot of times they feel lost. And that's where part of our job as emergency managers, every disaster begins and ends locally. It's on our shoulders and our community shoulders to recover from that. And our long-term recovery committee has been phenomenal. And that's private sector, public sector, nonprofit. That's everybody working together to make sure that our community can recover and people can come back and they don't feel forgotten. And that's the big thing is when you lose everything, the one thing you want to know is that you're just not forgotten and you're not going to be left alone. And that's one of our big challenges moving forward.
Jillian?
Yeah, I echo that too. Real quick, Troy, sorry.
No, I'm going to just real quickly just ask, do you think Jillian and Kim, for that matter, do you think most people understand that homeowners insurance does not cover flood losses? To this day, here in South Central Texas, I still don't think people get that. And I think you said
no. I think they're completely snowed by it.
Yeah.
Well, James,
Jeremy.
Yeah, just real quick, just to kind of bounce off what Jillian said there. I think most people after a disaster, whether it be a flood, tornado, whatever the case might be, I think really what most people are looking for is just someone to listen to them, just to listen to their thoughts, just listen to what they've been through, and just through my previous emergency management experience, it just seems like it just gives them that sense of, I don't know if you call it sense of peace or whatever you want to call it. It just seems like that may help them kind of start the ball rolling, if you will, to rebuilding their lives.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think you're absolutely.
Jillian, what's the one thing you want people to know about your job that maybe people don't understand? Something emergency managers do that nobody gets. We talked a lot about weather, but I think the one thing that people don't understand, you just don't deal with tornadoes and floods and weather hazards. I mean, you're dealing with all kind of stuff here.
Right.
The hazmat stuff alone is insane.
oh Lord.
Oh, a lot of the work that we do is behind the scenes, and we get called in when our community is overwhelmed. So you don't see us a lot. Like you see the first responders, you see the fire department, you see the hazmat team, you see our law enforcement partners, but it's our job, and we stay pretty hidden, is to support them when all heck breaks loose. When you have the tornado, when you have that large hazmat, we're looking at cybersecurity now. We've been out for, any number of events for, standoffs and other things. We're kind of like, some people have, kind of compared us to a spare tire. When was the last time you checked your spare tire? And do you know where it is? And can you actually get your car on the jack to be able to even use it? And that's a lot of what, kind of what we do is so much behind the scenes. It's all of the planning. It's pulling all the players together. And we prepare for our community's worst day so that when it happens, we can support the community and help them in that response. And then also we can help them recover, because at the end of the day, you know, it's the community. That's who we have. It's your neighbors who are going to step up and bring their tractor over to your house to cut down the trees. And we saw that in the tornado. We saw it in the flood. You know, I think the other thing is, you know, taking care of yourself after a disaster is really important. I will tell you, I struggled after the May 28th tornado. It was tough. I mean, and I've been in disasters before. My parents, you know, practically we had 2 trees through the roof in Hurricane Andrew. I was used to that. I'd been to Greensburg. We've had tornado warnings in Douglas County and for Lawrence before. This one was different. This one was so very different. And I had to seek help, and talking about it and working through it. And it's okay to do that. You've really got to take care of yourself, because we can't take care of the community if we're not taking care of ourselves and our volunteers. And that's something we're really focused on this year as well.
I tell people all the time, if you need some help after an event like that, if you go seek help, that's not a sign of weakness. That's a sign of strength.
Mhm.
Absolute strength. And we all fight the same problem. It doesn't matter how old you are, how many events you've worked. We all deal with mental health issues after these horrible events. And you see things that people shouldn't see.
Mhm.
And, you know, it's hard to process all of that. But Jillian, we've had you for an hour here. I feel bad that we've kept you more than an hour. If so, have you got
Hey, James, she's got a real important severe weather symposium coming up there in their county. And Jeremy mentioned this. So make sure to ask her about that before you let her get away.
Yeah, go plug away.
All right, fantastic. So, so on a high note, so we host the Severe Weather Symposium in Lawrence, Kansas. So that's going to be on March 7th. It's a Saturday. Now, normally we go a full day. It's basically 7:30 to 4. Now this year, we're rebuilding. So like I mentioned, in 2019, we had an interim director, and we're now fully staffed. Finally, yay, as of December 30th, we are fully staffed. I know, right? It's been a long time coming. I'm very excited. So we're going to go a half a day this year. And our goal for that is to teach and to train and to educate more than our basic spotter training. So Weather Service comes out that traditional spotter training, and it's fantastic. And we take it that next step. So we're looking at different meteorological components. What did the weather look like? And specifically, we're going to look at May 28th. It was a very interesting storm. It was an interesting setup. It was rain wrapped. And there's a number of things that came into the environment with this storm. And so we want to help educate those folks and give them that opportunity to sort of look back at that event in a different way. So we're bringing in perspectives from the local emergency managers. So not only did our county get hit, Leavenworth County was also impacted. They had the F4 damage. So their emergency managers coming over. And then we always bring in our local TV meteorologist, who played just a pivotal role in getting information out about this tornado. Normally after a tornado, you hear, well, I didn't hear the warning, or there wasn't a warning. No person that I spoke to said, I didn't know it was coming.
Wow.
And that is our integrated warning.
Yeah, that's a shock.
Earlier, right? I know. But it was so great. The teamwork, we got very lucky too. The right time of day, the warnings, we had 40 minutes of lead time in Lawrence specifically. Our TV media partners were on it. Our National Weather Service was on it. Social media was running like crazy. So we're going to look at not only the TV meteorologist perspective, but our National Weather Service perspective, visual cues that people could have maybe gotten some inkling of do I get close? Do I not? So we're really going to look back at May 28th, digest it, and really hit on the successes from that event and why we host this event. It's also an opportunity for us to engage. So we are in Topeka National Weather Service County Morning area, and we're in Kansas City's media market, which gets their information from the Weather Service office in Kansas City. So we're somewhat disconnected, but this is a great way that we integrate with them, and they come over and they spend some time with us. And that's how we've built a lot of those relationships over the years. So we're really looking forward to it. It's a half day and it's $15. It's super cheap to come to, and we feed you, so you won't go hungry. But we do several speakers, and then we usually do a panel discussion with the integrated warning team and the speakers. 19 years in running now. So it's a really fun event. It's a low key event. We really enjoyed it. It's a good opportunity to learn. So we're looking forward to March 7th this year.
And the venue is?
We're going to be at the Lawrence Arts Center this year, keeping it a little small. It's got a great auditorium, really easy access for folks. It's downtown. There's a parking garage right across the street, which is free in many cases. So smaller venue a little bit, but we're looking forward to 2021. We'll go full day again, and we'll be back at a larger venue. But for now, we're going to come back, do our half day, get everybody back into the swing of things, and then jump into 2021 planning.
Awesome. So Jillian, if anybody wants to ask a question, follow you, what's the best way to do that? Twitter or what?
Yeah, absolutely. Follow us on Twitter. We are at DGCOEM, so Douglas County Emergency Management. We're on Facebook under the same DGCOEM. You can also go to our website. It's douglascountyks.org. That's douglascountyks.org. Super easy to find. Type in symposium. You can't miss us.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time and your expertise and your passion and your empathy for people and the job you're doing, and just fantastic. So we look forward to having you back on the show one time soon. Thanks a lot.
I look forward to it. It was a pleasure. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Jillian.
Okay, so let's see. Aubrey, by chance, would you have time for an email segment after Tony's astronomy report?
Sure.
Awesome. Well, I'll give you a few minutes to get ready for that. Let's roll Tony Rice in this week's astronomy report. We'll come back with the email inbox, picks of the week, and a whole lot more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
A question that comes up a lot when I share my telescope with the neighbors or at a star party hosted by my local astronomy club is, can we see the moon landing sites? Unfortunately, the answer is no, and a little back of the envelope math shows why. My telescope's an inexpensive Dobsonian design. The business end where the light enters, and the primary measure of a telescope is 8 inches. Some of the scopes that amateurs bring out to the star parties are twice that. They require a ladder to use and a trailer to transport, as well as an investment of tens of thousands of dollars. Even the biggest man-made objects left on the moon, the Apollo lunar module descent stages, are out of reach of these telescopes. In fact, even the largest one on Earth can't do it. When we try to see things that appear very small or very close together, we run into a limitation of optical physics, whether you're looking through a huge telescope or just using your eyes, which have an aperture of about 7 millimeters for the record. This was first measured by a pair of British astronomers, W.R. Dawes and Lord Rayleigh. You may recognize Rayleigh's name. He's the same physicist who described the scattering of light as giving the daytime sky its blue color. Astronomers measure the nighttime sky using angular measurement. Horizon to horizon is 180 degrees. To calculate how much of that sky you can resolve with a given telescope, divide 166 by the aperture you'll be looking through in millimeters. So my 200 millimeter telescope can resolve down to about half an arc second. That 10.4 meter giant telescope in the Canary Islands, it can resolve down to 11 hundredths of an arc second. It's still not enough though. Even the 30 meter plan for the Mauna Kea Observatory can't pull it off. Problem is those lunar modules are only about 14 feet across. That means even at perigee, when the moon is at its closest, their angular measurement is just over 0.5 millionth of a degree wide. Turns out we need a telescope 100 meters wide to even make them out. All these numbers are just theoretical and likely wouldn't perform that well due to challenges just seeing through our atmosphere. Our best view came in 2009 and 2012 when the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter showed us details of each of the Apollo landing sites from its position 31 miles above the lunar surface. But even then, those descent stages, they were just a few pixels across. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
All right, time now to dive into the good old email inbox to see if there's anything in there.
We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
All right, I'm going to start with the most in-depth one first. This is from our good friend from across the pond, Richard Cook. Question for James. I watched the best part of 3 hours of your Saturday coverage via Facebook. This was from January 11th. My question is, since the 2011 outbreak, what has, in your view, changed to make extreme weather coverage maybe easier since then? And then what is still challenging when it comes to on-air coverage?
Well, there's no doubt. There's no doubt for us. The biggest challenge, it's the mobile home issue. I mean, I'll just say it up front. It is front of mind. We know that. We know we have to get better. And we had 3 people that were killed in mobile homes on that day, on the 11th of January. So we've got work to do. I think what is better over the last 9 years is some of the understanding that's been given to us by people like Kim, the social scientist, because none of us have formal training in human behavior, social science. Most of us are just physical science practitioners. So I think they really helped us understand that people kind of watch the way we act. They watch the way we dress. They listen to our words in certain ways we didn't understand. We know now better how to use social media, how to reach certain people groups we didn't reach very well back in 2011. And I think we're better, but we've still got a long way to go. But the biggest issue, no doubt, is the mobile home issue.
And it seemed like there was a big push. I know you obviously before these big events, you guys are talking about it. Was there, before that event, was there a bigger push talking about mobile homes, what to do, call to action?
Yeah, we did something I've never done before. I've been doing this 41 years. We have never done this before. We recommended that people leave mobile homes and cars, basically take your tornado precautions if you are under a severe thunderstorm warning. We've never done that before because we know that most people, severe thunderstorm warning, no big deal. It's not a tornado warning. But we knew with the dynamics in play and the wind field with this thing, there could be widespread trees down everywhere. And we just thought it was the right thing to do. And we did this as a weather enterprise, the Weather Service, the television Mets. So on that day, if you are under a severe thunderstorm warning, get into a small room on the lowest floor near the center, get out of a car, get out of a mobile home. And we tried to give people plenty of time. The mobile home thing, we were cognizant of that. And we still lost 3 people. But that's the one thing different that we did on that day we've never done before, which was an interesting case study. And so, the amazing thing to me, we didn't get a lot of negative feedback on it. I thought everybody would be. Well, I had to go down to my basement. There wasn't a tornado warning, and that's just horrible. The amount of negative feedback was stunningly small. So that was very interesting.
And you have to think of it. Yes, you lost. There were 3 lost, but had that not been done, what would that number have been? We don't know, but that number could have been very different. You don't know how many were actually saved, to be honest.
There were thousands of trees blown down, just thousands of trees blown down. And in many cases, they went through a mobile home or went through a house. We don't know. You're right. But I think the death toll could have been higher that day. And I think people were, here's the other thing too. I think we recognized storm anxiety leading up to the event. SPC had us in a risk of severe storms 6 or 7 days in advance on the day 6, the day 7 outlook. So for 6 and 7 days, you hear about this day every day, dangerous weather. And storm anxiety is a real thing. And people really struggle with that. And we recognize that. And, we try to let people know we're walking a fine line between letting you know this is going to be a dangerous day and the fact that we're not trying to increase storm anxiety here. And I think people appreciated that. So it's just a matter of talking with people and communicating with them and listening to them and being open. And we did our best. But that was, again, the 3 people that died is 3 people too many.
All right. And the next one. Now, Kim, I don't want to make another snafu like I did with Kevin and risk you not being here next week. So the James Spann Weather Severity Index, is it okay if I describe that?
Is it the
photos?
Please do.
So I don't know where this came. I don't know where this came from, but we'll do. James in a full suit is described as the weather being sunshine and rainbows. Yeah. If James has no suit jacket on, well, then things are starting to get serious. Yeah. And there is a photoshopped photo. I'm not sure whose body his head is on.
Are you sure?
Not mine.
Why? Not would you even say that, Aubrey? Of course, that's James's body.
It was convincing.
It is very convincing. And if James has no shirt on, may God have mercy on our souls. That was funny. That made us chuckle. James, they're all about you this week. So this one comes in from David Watson. I'm a huge fan of the show. It's what makes my work week great. I've completed the most recent episode, now 601. My goal is to complete all of them. My favorite quote so far is when James said, "When we have an EF4, EF5 tornado, Brian Peters takes his pants off."
There you go. That's it.
I was at work, had explosive laughter, and was getting some weird looks. I hope you guys can get Liz Leitman from NWS SPC in Norman. She would make a great guest. That was quite entertaining. And then let's see, this one came in from Harvey Day Jr. It was a tweet from Eric Elwell in Ohio. NWS investigating damage in Troy, Ohio. A tornado warning was out at the time. This is from the January 11th tornado outbreak. If the tornado was confirmed, it would be the second January tornado in a row, or second January in a row with a confirmed Ohio tornado. And I believe they did confirm that, correct?
Think so, yes.
I'm pretty sure that they did. And then Robert Strucker sent in, after hearing so much about JB's stories on the show, I've finally seen what Miss Kitty looks like.
Of Gunsmoke, for those that don't know.
I saw her, the actress who played her, Amanda Blake, on an old episode of the game show Password. I guess I can now see why that orangutan was so smitten.
And if you don't know that story, I need to get that soundbite and clip it and play it sometime. I still laugh over that whole thing. That's
all right. And the last one from Rob Strucker. I don't recall anything about May 3rd, 1999 specifically being done. I would love to hear a discussion about the Moore storm that day.
We've talked about that a good bit, but I bet you Kim can pull a show together on that one.
Yeah, I'm sure I could have. I saw that email and I thought, man, did we miss the opportunity to talk about it at the 20 year?
We would have just had a 20 year. I swear we did something on the 20 year.
We did. Yeah. It was this past May.
Right.
And I thought we said something, but it might be that we really didn't make it the focus of a whole show.
I feel like it was a collaboration with something.
I like Jeremy. I don't think we did a whole show on it, and that's.
I think you mentioned it like with a brief snippet, but I don't think you did a whole dedicated show on it.
And on that note, y'all, I've got to do TV here, so we're in the deep freeze. So Troy, Kim, y'all take over here for picks of the week.
Take care.
And you got me for about another minute and a half or 2 minutes.
Oh.
All right. Well, then how about we start, Aubrey? Let's start with your pick of the week.
Okay, so I sent in a pick of the week, and it's I sent it with stipulations because I did not want to be promoting myself. However, one thing, if you follow me on social media, we kind of have this side business, do some woodworking, and I make some signs. And with the fires in Australia, I kind of wanted to do something to raise a little money to put some awareness out there. So I thought I could put my talents to good use. This is usually a little bit of a slower season for me with signs. So I have a couple different types of Australia signs that I've created and came up with, and I'm donating 100% of the profits from those signs will go to WWF Australia, which not only helps the animals, but also helps with planting new trees and supporting the wildlife and rebuilding forests, which is vital, obviously, not just to the animals, but to the atmosphere and to the environment. So I was just really trying to find a great cause. And so far I'm up to $60. Had a little experience fundraising last year. So just thought I'd put my talent to good use. Again, I'm not trying to profit from this whatsoever. Just wanted to take a little spare time I had in the afternoons and do something. So that link, we'll put that for you. It's on Etsy, and that's Fort Wagler Woodworking. We've got some of those signs on there.
That's wonderful. And if you haven't seen her woodworking stuff, it is just beautiful. You should definitely check it out. And just what a wonderful way to use your talents to help, Aubrey. Thank you for that. All right. Jeremy, do you happen to have any pick of the week?
I actually have two, so bear with me. The first one, big surprise, is a website from Autorama regarding basic tips for weather photography. So if anyone out there wants to learn a little bit ins and outs, just some general, if you have a general interest in it or what have you, you can check that out. The second one, now Bill did not show me how to do share screen. So if this works, you get an exclusive. If not, it's a fail. So, all right. So there we are. I have no idea if you can see this.
Yep,
Wow.
we can.
Okay, very good. So this is a photograph. This is an exclusive. This is the first time I've actually put this out there for anyone to see. This was a lightning shot. I know James says be descriptive, since this is mostly a audio that people are going to listen to. So this is a triple CG lightning strike near Sundance, Wyoming, back on June 25th of last year. And the shameless plug, if you want to give us a follow, you can do so on Facebook at JRB Storm Photography, and then Twitter at JRB Storm, and Instagram at JRB Storm. Otherwise, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeremy. That's wonderful. You're absolutely welcome to plug. And we have to say good night to Aubrey for her show. All right, Troy, what do you have?
I'm gonna come back. I really don't have a website pick of the week, but something that Kim, we kind of started talking to James and with Jeremy and everyone about, and that is of late there's been a lot of topic of discussion about the American Meteorological Society, but I gotta give a plug to Keith Sider and all the people up at the AMS for all of what a get together, and the 100th annual meeting of the AMS in Boston. And Kim, so amazing that I got to see a lot of the people that have been in the society for many years, but then you get to see the younger people that you and I, listen to in some of the sessions that continue to kind of continue to grow into the field as well. And I have to say the AMS did a very nice job for whatever all the discussion points have been lately about the dues structure and all this kind of thing. I think they did themselves proud with the 100th annual meeting. And I know we had Keith on back during the fall, and he talked to us about how he hoped this meeting was successful. Keith, Claudia, everyone up at AMS headquarters, you did yourself proud. That's my plug of the week. That's my pick of the week.
That's a wonderful pick. And it was a great meeting. Coming away from it, everything was just really nice and very well done. They should be very proud of the meeting they put forward, especially for something that was very large. There were a lot of people who wanted to go this year for the centennial. So
Kim, one other thing too that I don't think we've mentioned is that there were over 5,500 registrants at this meeting. It makes us the largest meeting ever of the AMS. And it was just a really, really good meeting.
Yep, I agree. Just outstanding job, especially like you said, for just being so large. Yeah. So yeah, thank you. Great pick. I'll go ahead and wrap things up here. No, it's getting late for everybody, but my pick of the week is a newsletter written by the director of the Natural Hazard Center in Boulder. This is a social science focused center. Well, they're interdisciplinary, but it's traditionally been run by social scientists, people who are really interested in the kinds of questions we're talking about tonight. How do we understand human behavior and how to influence it to be more proactive and in the public good. And she just writes a little bit about vulnerable populations and how we can think about them in ways that are a little different than people tend to. For example, a lot of people tend to think that people are just really complacent, but if you really get into their lives and understand all of the burdens, that they have to deal with, for example, then you start to see things a little differently. She writes about it so much more eloquently than I'm explaining it. But if you're interested, that link will be up on our website. And with that, guys, I'm going to go ahead and close this out. Thank you both for all of your great thoughts and comments. And Jeremy, of course, thank you so much for joining us on the show as a guest panelist tonight. You did a great job.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeremy. Look at his picture back here. This is a nice picture back there.
Just to clarify, I did not pay these people off to do this. So.
Hey, but
no, we're paid nothing.
Well, speak for yourself, Kim. But I got a good lightning picture of it. And thank you, Jeremy and Chantelli both. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
All right, guys. Have a wonderful evening. We'll see you next time.
And I see I'm the last guy here. Thank you for watching and or listening this week. Great to have Jillian with us. That was a fun show. Jeremy, great to have him with us as well. So I got to go finish this newscast back in here. We'll see you guys next Monday night, 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. Y'all have a great week and God bless.